I'm Anya Sharma, 29, and about to face my estranged family after 5 long years. Tonight, they're gathering at Anya's Table, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, to celebrate my sister Vivian's engagement. My stomach knots as I straighten my simple black dress, the silk feeling cool against my skin. Sometimes the hardest reservations to make are with your own past. Little do they know how much has changed since I walked away. They dismissed me, they judged me, and tonight they're stepping into my domain. The setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the polished oak tables of Anya's Table. The air hummed with the subtle, sophisticated symphony of a Michelin-starred restaurant, the soft clinking of glassware, the murmur of hushed conversations, the distant sizzle from the open kitchen. Every detail, from the hand-blown pendant lights to the custom-lined linen, reflected a meticulous vision, my vision. Tonight, however, this sanctuary felt less like a triumph and more like a carefully constructed stage for a confrontation I'd both dreaded and secretly anticipated. The scent of saffron and reduced wine, usually comforting, only intensified my anxiety. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut meant something very specific in my family. The Sterlings weren't just wealthy, we were a legacy. My parents, Eleanor and Arthur Sterling, built their identities around status markers. The right address, the right schools, the right professions. Our sprawling colonial home hosted fundraisers where my mother would parade us children around like accessories, her pride directly proportional to how well we fit into her vision of success. Vivienne, my older sister, was their golden child, destined for Yale Law. Leo, my older brother, with his aptitude for mathematics, was earmarked for investment banking. I was always the creative one, a euphemism for the family disappointment. The core conflict of my childhood stemmed from this disparity in expectations. While Vivian excelled at debate club and Leo won math competitions, I found my true calling in our housekeeper Sophia's domain, the kitchen. Sophia, a warm-hearted woman from Greece, recognized something in me my parents couldn't. Genuine passion. "You have the hands for this work," she'd say, guiding my small fingers as I kneaded dough or diced vegetables. My parents, however, viewed cooking as a servant's work, a declaration my father made explicitly when I dared to mention culinary school during high school. That judgment, that deep-seated disdain for my true calling, was the first and most enduring conflict in my life. To appease them, I reluctantly applied to business schools, eventually attending Dartmouth, a family tradition my father and grandfather had upheld. But even there, the magnetic pull of the culinary world was undeniable. I found ways to nurture my passion covertly, enrolling in food science electives and nutrition courses, justifying them as complementary to business administration. My apartment became the clandestine hub for an underground supper club where I charged fellow students for elaborate 5-course meals. The profits fueled my secret weekend workshops with local chefs. A double life I maintained with fierce determination, each covert class a silent, defiant middle finger to their expectations. The turning point arrived 6 months into my profoundly unhappy MBA program. Chef Antoine Dubois, a French culinary master with 3 Michelin stars, visited campus for a lecture series. I had helped cater a university reception he attended, pouring my soul into every dish. After tasting my food, he pulled me aside, his accent thick, but his eyes serious. "Who taught you to make a reduction like this?" he demanded. "I taught myself," I admitted. "From books, videos, experimenting." He handed me his card, a simple gesture that felt like a lifeline. "You are wasting your talent here," he declared, his gaze unwavering. "Come to my kitchen in New York. I will make you great." That night shattered my carefully constructed facade, igniting a fire within me that demanded to be seen. The decision was swift, decisive, and terrifying. 2 weeks later, I stood in my parents' immaculate living room, explaining why I was dropping out of my MBA program to attend culinary school. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. My father, Arthur, finally broke it. his voice dangerously quiet. "This is absolutely unacceptable. We've invested everything in your education." I countered, my voice surprisingly steady. "Everything except respect for what I actually want." My mother, Eleanor, her face hardened, issued the icy ultimatum. "If you pursue this hobby, you do it without our support, financial or otherwise." Vivienne, always the sharpest tongue, scoffed. "Always the rebel. Let's see how long you last cooking for minimum wage." I knew then there was no turning back. I left that night with nothing but my personal savings and a small suitcase. The next 5 years were harder than anything I'd known. 18-hour days, a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, loans for culinary school. Every burn, every aching muscle was a silent testament to my resolve. But under Chef Antoine's mentorship, I thrived. The kitchen's intensity, discipline, and creativity fed something in me that business school never could, and then came the opportunity that would change everything. An investor, James Warren, who had tasted my food at one of Antoine's events. Little did my family know their disappointment had, in those very 5 years, forged a culinary empire. The stage was set, the curtain poised to rise, and tonight they would witness the unveiling. When Vivian and Leo were chasing glory in debate clubs and math competitions, I found my calling in the most unexpected of places, the kitchen. It wasn't the gleaming, sterile laboratory of my parents' dreams, but a space filled with warmth, chaos, and a profound sense of purpose. It was a secret world, vibrant and alive, where I could finally breathe. My family saw only a dusty corner. I saw my destiny. Comment 1 right now if you've ever found your true passion where no one expected it. You definitely don't want to miss the next part of this video. My earliest memories aren't of gilded tea parties or hushed museum visits, but of the symphony of clanking pots and sizzling pans from our sprawling colonial home's kitchen. This wasn't the grand, formal dining room where Mother hosted her fundraisers. This was Sophia's domain. The air was thick with the scent of garlic, olive oil, and freshly baked bread, aromas that even now transport me back to a time when pure, unadulterated joy existed. It was my escape from the suffocating expectations that permeated every other room of the Sterling household. Sophia, our housekeeper, was a warm-hearted woman from Greece, her hands perpetually dusted with flour, her eyes crinkling with kindness. She saw something in me that my parents never could, genuine passion. "You have the hands for this work, Agapimo," she'd say, patiently guiding my small fingers as I kneaded bread dough or precisely diced vegetables. She was my first unspoken mentor, instilling in me the fundamentals of technique and, more importantly, the soul of cooking. Years later, Chef Antoine Dubois, a French culinary master with 3 Michelin stars, would become my next pivotal guide. The clash between my burgeoning passion and my family's entrenched values was stark, brutal, and utterly predictable. "Cooking? A servant's work?" my father Arthur declared during my junior year of high school when I dared to mention culinary school. His voice was a cold, dismissive blade. "Sterling's hire chefs. They don't become them." My mother Eleanor offered a tight-lipped smile that conveyed her absolute disdain. That pronouncement sealed my fate in their eyes. I was the family disappointment, stubbornly choosing a path they deemed beneath us, a path without prestige or status. To appease their relentless pressure, I reluctantly applied to business schools, eventually attending Dartmouth, upholding the Sterling family tradition. But even within those hollowed, corporate halls, the magnetic pull of the culinary world was undeniable. I found ways to nurture my passion covertly, enrolling in food science electives and nutrition courses, justifying them as complementary to business administration. My apartment became the clandestine hub for an underground supper club, where I charged fellow students for elaborate 5-course meals. The modest profits fueled my secret weekend workshops with local chefs. A thrilling, defiant double life I maintained with fierce determination. The turning point arrived 6 months into my profoundly unhappy MBA program. My soul was suffocating under the weight of spreadsheets and market analyses. Then, Chef Antoine Dubois, a French culinary master with 3 Michelin stars, visited campus for a lecture series. I had poured my heart into catering a university reception he attended. After tasting my food, he pulled me aside, his accent thick but his eyes serious, piercing through all my pretense. "Who taught you to make a reduction like this?" he demanded. "I taught myself," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. He handed me his card, a simple gesture that felt like a lifeline, a key to a new world. "You are wasting your talent here," he declared, his gaze unwavering. "Come to my kitchen in New York. I will make you great." That night shattered my carefully constructed facade and ignited a fire within me that demanded to be seen. The decision was swift, decisive, and terrifying. 2 weeks later, I stood in my parents' immaculate living room, explaining why I was dropping out of my MBA program to attend culinary school. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. My father, Arthur, finally broke it, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is absolutely unacceptable. We've invested everything in your education." I countered, my voice surprisingly steady. "Everything except respect for what I actually want." My mother, Eleanor, her face hardened, issued the icy ultimatum. "If you pursue this hobby, you do it without our support, financial or otherwise." Vivienne, always the sharpest tongue, scoffed. "Always the rebel. Let's see how long you last cooking for minimum wage." I knew then there was no turning back. I left that night with nothing but my personal savings and a small suitcase. The next 5 years were harder than anything I'd known. 18-hour days, a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, loans for culinary school. Every burn, every aching muscle was a silent testament to my resolve. But under Chef Antoine's mentorship, I thrived. The kitchen's intensity, discipline, and creativity fed something in me that business school never could. And then came the opportunity that would change everything. An investor, James Warren, who had tasted my food at one of Antoine's events. Little did my family know, their disappointment had in those very 5 years forged a culinary empire. The stage was set, the curtain poised to rise, and tonight they would witness the unveiling. 2 weeks later, I stood in my parents' immaculate living room, the air thick with unspoken judgment. I explained why I was dropping out of my MBA program for culinary school. The silence that followed my announcement was not merely quiet, it was deafening. It was the sound of my future as they envisioned it, shattering. Their perfect world, perfectly curated, now had a glaring, messy crack right down the middle, and I was it. The formal living room, usually a stage for polite social theater, transformed into a courtroom. Every antique furnishing, every carefully placed vase felt like an accusation. Then the scene shifts abruptly to the gritty, unglamorous reality of my new life, a cramped apartment in Queens, shared with 3 strangers. The lingering smell of stale cooking and cheap detergent. This was my chosen battleground, far from their polished halls. My parents' investment in my education now mocked me from behind a wall of financial and emotional ice. My father, Arthur, finally broke the silence, his voice dangerously quiet, betraying the simmering fury beneath. My mother, Eleanor, her face a mask of hardened disappointment, delivered the ultimatum. Vivienne, my sister, ever the dutiful and sharp-tongued heir to their values, offered a cruel, chilling laugh. Even Leo, my brother, usually more empathetic, could only manage a look of profound embarrassment. These were the arbiters of my fate, sealing my immediate future with their contempt. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Arthur stated, his words like carefully sharpened knives. "We've invested everything in your education." My retort was swift, fueled by years of stifled resentment. "Everything except respect for what I actually want." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "If you pursue this hobby, you do it without our support, financial or otherwise." Vivienne's sneer cut deepest. Always the rebel. Let's see how long you last cooking for minimum wage. That night I walked out, not just from their house, but from their entire system of control, carrying nothing but my meager savings and a single suitcase. The next 5 years were a relentless gauntlet, harder than anything I'd ever known. 18-hour days became my norm, a grueling prep cook shift at a bistro, then straight to a line cook position in Midtown, often followed by weekend shifts at a bakery. Sleep was a luxury, burns and cuts a constant companion on my hands, visible reminders of my dedication. I devoured culinary books in my rare free moments, studying technique obsessively, but under Chef Antoine Dubois' mentorship, I didn't just survive, I thrived. His intensity, his discipline, his creative fire ignited something profound within me, nourishing a part of my soul that business school had starved. Within 18 months, I was his sous chef. And then, the opportunity that would change everything. 2.5 years ago, while working a private event at Chef Antoine's restaurant, a guest approached me. It was James Warren, of Warren Capital. He had tasted my special course, a dish I had poured every ounce of my burgeoning skill into, and demanded to meet the chef. He was genuinely surprised to find someone so young had created what he called the most innovative dish he'd tasted in years. He saw potential, not just passion. That conversation blossomed into a business proposal, a whirlwind of planning, and the discovery of a raw, untapped space, a failed nightclub that would soon become Anya's Table. 2 years ago, Anya's Table opened its doors with me as executive chef and partial owner. The acclaim was immediate, partially fueled by Chef Antoine's powerful endorsement and industry connections. We were profitable within 6 months. 3 months after that, I secured a loan using the restaurant's undeniable success as leverage and bought out my partners. I became the sole proprietor, the undisputed owner of my destiny. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had indeed used my business education, just not in the way my parents had ever intended. Anya's Table quickly became the hardest reservation to get in the city, a testament to raw talent, relentless hard work, and my unyielding vision. Last month, Food and Wine magazine featured us in their Future of American Cuisine issue. Through all of this, I maintained a deliberate distance from my family. Occasional stilted phone calls with my mother, polite holiday cards, nothing substantial. They knew I was doing something with food, but remained blissfully ignorant of my actual monumental success. I kept it that way intentionally. I craved recognition on my own terms, not as a desperate plea for their approval. So, when the embossed invitation to Vivienne's engagement dinner arrived, bearing the address of my own restaurant, I smiled. After days of deliberation, I accepted, not to seek validation, but perhaps to finally close a chapter. 5 years had given me perspective. I was secure enough in my success now to face them without crumbling under their judgment. Tonight I would step into my restaurant, ready to play the role of the struggling black sheep one last time, knowing a seismic shift was inevitable. The familiar scent of Anya's Table enveloped me as I stepped through the grand doors. Saffron, reduced wine, the subtle perfume of fresh herbs that I insisted on having delivered twice daily. Usually this aroma centered me, reminded me of everything I'd built. Tonight, however, it only intensified my anxiety, a strange cocktail of apprehension and a thrilling anticipation of what was to come. I was about to walk into my own empire, utterly disguised. The restaurant hummed with the energy I'd worked so hard to cultivate, a testament to countless sleepless nights and unwavering dedication. The lighting was meticulously calibrated, dim enough for intimacy, yet bright enough to appreciate the artful plating of each dish. The sound level perfectly balanced vibrant conversation and intimate privacy. Tables were spaced just so, close enough to create a convivial buzz, far enough apart for discretion. Every detail, from the linen weight to the custom-designed chairs that encouraged lingering, was my decision, my personal signature etched into the very fabric of this place. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a simple black Diane von Furstenberg dress, accessorized with a single strand of pearls inherited from my grandmother. It was understated elegance, a quiet luxury that my status-conscious family would likely misread as me trying too hard with limited means. My hair was pulled back into a sleek chignon, another detail they'd probably interpret as me not being able to afford a proper styling. Julian, my most senior server, spotted me immediately. His eyes widened slightly in question. I rarely entered through the front as a guest. I gave him a subtle shake of my head and mouthed, "Not yet." He nodded discreetly, a silent co-conspirator, and continued with his duties. On the entryway I could already see them. They had requested the center table, of course they had, arranged like a tableau of effortless affluence. My mother, Eleanor, in Chanel, perpetually assessing, my father, Arthur, examining the wine list with exaggerated concentration, his posture radiating old money. Vivian, draped in new season Gucci, exuded an air of calculated sophistication, her engagement ring flashing. Next to her sat Preston Hayes, her fiancé, slicked back hair, a watch catching the light, a walking embodiment of status and smug self-assurance. Leo and his wife Chloe, both in impeccable business attire, completed the picture, looking as if they'd come straight from a high-powered meeting. Clara, my hostess, approached with a warm smile. "Good evening, miss." She caught herself just in time. "Your party is already seated. May I show you to their table?" "Thank you, Clara," I murmured, appreciating her discretion. As we neared, my mother noticed me first. Her eyes performed the familiar head-to-toe scan from childhood, calculating my appearance's approximate value and finding it wanting. "Anya, darling," she said, rising to air-kiss my cheeks. "You've finally arrived. We were beginning to wonder." "I'm exactly on time, Mother," I replied, checking my watch. 7:30 on the dot. Arthur gave me a stiff hug. "You look healthy," he offered, which, in sterling speak, meant I hadn't maintained the borderline unhealthy slenderness prized in our social circle. Vivian barely bothered to stand, offering her cheek. "This is Preston," she announced, her fiancé rising to extend a hand. His grip was too firm, a power move. "Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, he introduced himself, devoid of pleasantries. "Just made junior partner at Goldman. No nice to meet you, just credentials." The Sterling family love language. Leo offered a more genuine greeting, but Chloe's smile seemed strained. I later learned she'd found this impressively exclusive restaurant anxious if it'd meet their standards. "Well," Eleanor said as I took my seat, "we've already ordered champagne. I hope that's acceptable." They'd chosen the second most expensive option, showy but not reckless. Typical. Ricardo, our sommelier, approached with the champagne. He caught my eye, a slight raise of his eyebrow asking if I wanted him to acknowledge me. I gave an imperceptible shake of my head. "Excellent choice," he said to my father instead, presenting the bottle with practiced elegance. Arthur announced their engagement, hoping for special treatment. "Congratulations," Ricardo replied smoothly. "Anya's table is honored to host such a special occasion." I chimed in innocently. "I'm surprised you managed a reservation. I've heard it's quite difficult." Preston leaned forward, a smug wink. "I know people. Called in a favor with a client." I bit my tongue. The client was likely Craig Winters, one of our regular investors. I made a mental note to speak with him. "Well, aren't you resourceful?" I murmured, raising my champagne flute. "To Vivian and Preston," Arthur declared. "A perfect match and a brilliant future." We clinked glasses. I took a small sip, noting the champagne was served at the precise temperature I had trained my staff to maintain. The game had officially begun. My mother set down her glass, fixing me with her attention. "So, tell us what you've been up to these past few years. You've been so mysterious." The table's focus shifted to me. 5 pairs of eyes, evaluating, ready to judge. The silent curtain had fallen, and the main act was about to commence. "Is this all?" Vivian asked, examining the bite-sized sphere of compressed watermelon. Disappointment etched across her face. I'm famished." Her tone was a perfectly honed instrument of disdain, cutting through the refined hum of my restaurant. This wasn't just a critique of the amuse-bouche. It was a prelude, a declaration that nothing I presented would ever truly be enough for her. The table became a silent arena, the meticulously plated dishes transformed into battlegrounds. Around us, the restaurant continued its seamless dance of service, unaware of the subtle warfare unfolding at our central table. Each course, a delicate composition I had poured months of effort into perfecting, was presented with grace by my staff, only to be met with either blatant dismissal or performative analysis by my family. The air, once filled with anticipation, now crackled with the unspoken tension of their judgments and my silent observations. Isabel, one of my most experienced servers, approached with the amuse-bouche, a vibrant sphere topped with fermented black garlic and a microgreen. "Compliments of the kitchen," she announced, her voice a soothing balm. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flash of loyalty, a silent acknowledgement of the drama unfolding, before she seamlessly slipped back into her professional role. She was a silent ally, her quiet disappointment at Vivian's untouched creation mirroring my own. My mother, Eleanor, ever calorie-conscious, took the smallest bite. Arthur, my father, popped the whole thing in, barely tasting. "Still with that cooking phase?" Vivian sighed, as if I'd admitted to a regrettable addiction. "I thought surely by now you'd have moved on to something more substantial." Leo, attempting a defense, managed to make it sound like criticism. "Not everyone can handle the corporate path." Preston, utterly confused, interjected, "What exactly do you do? Line cook? Catering?" My vague answer of various roles only invited further condescension. "Well, we're just glad you're managing to support yourself," Eleanor declared with a fake graciousness, adding the familiar sting. "Though we've always said our door is open if things get too challenging." The unspoken question hung heavy. "Are you failing? Yet?" Their criticisms continued with each course. The heirloom tomato dish, a delicate composition I had perfected over months, was deemed too acidic, and the tomatoes not riper enough by Vivian, who barely touched hers. I bit my tongue, knowing those tomatoes had been selected at their peak that very morning from a farm upstate. Isabel, sensing my frustration, managed a practiced diplomatic reply. The seared scallops with brown butter emulsion arrived next, a spring special I was particularly proud of. Arthur declared it promising, while Preston, swirling his Sancerre, pronounced the wine list decent but passable. Ricardo, my sommelier poached from a Michelin-starred Parisian restaurant, shot me a glance, a silent inquiry, and I offered a subtle smile. The conversation inevitably circled back to my perceived professional stagnation. "She's probably hostessing somewhere, right, Enya?" Vivian scoffed. "Using that business degree to seat people?" Arthur interrupted. "After 5 years, I would have expected some advancement." My quiet assertion, "I've advanced," was met with Vivian's mocking laugh. "Into what? Assistant manager at Applebee's?" The tension escalated. Vivian, seemingly between positions herself, dismissed my passion project. When the hand-rolled tagliatelle arrived, Eleanor bemoaned the ridiculous portion size. "All this expense for 3 bites." Arthur grumbled about this new cuisine nonsense. And then the direct hit from Vivian. "So, how exactly are you affording a place like this on a food service salary? This is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city." All eyes turned to me. "I manage my finances carefully," I replied, my voice even. "Oh, please," Vivian scoffed. "A dinner here costs more than you probably make in a day. Who are you dating? Is he paying for this?" My denial only fueled her fire. "Are you in debt? Maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances?" Even Leo looked uncomfortable, but Vivian insisted on honesty, claiming I'd thrown away my education. The 4th course, a perfectly cooked duck breast, arrived. "This duck is undercooked," Preston announced after 1 bite. Dismissing my explanation of medium rare as optimal, he summarily demanded it be cooked properly, leaving Isabel to manage his arrogance. The tension at the table was palpable. a familiar tightness in my chest. I felt cornered, judged, still wanting. But I wasn't that insecure young woman anymore. I had built something tangible, something mine. For a moment, I considered revealing everything, watching their expressions shatter. But before I could decide, Preston's overcooked duck returned, now dry and tough. Arthur signaled for another wine, an $800 0 Bordeaux, ignoring my suggestion for a better pairing. The jabs continued through dessert, emotionally drained. The double burden of their condescension and their thoughtless critique of my life's work became unbearable. Then Julian approached with the black leather folder, the check. The moment I'd both dreaded and anticipated had arrived. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. The check. Julian approached with the black leather folder containing the bill, placing it discreetly in the center of the table. My father, Arthur, reached for it immediately, a reflex of patriarchal duty, but Preston intercepted. "Please, Arthur, allow me," he said, with the practiced smoothness of someone who has turned even generosity into a power move. I watched as Preston opened the folder, his confident smile shifting to barely concealed shock as he registered the total. The air at our table, already thick with the unspoken tension of a family dynamic on the verge of cracking, became a suffocating shroud. Around us, the restaurant hummed, a gentle backdrop to the unfolding drama, oblivious to the seismic shift about to occur. Every clink of glass, every hushed laugh from other diners seemed amplified, underscoring the sudden, electric silence at our table. My family leaned forward imperceptibly, their curiosity piqued by Preston's unexpected reaction, sensing something was amiss beyond typical dinner pleasantries. Preston Hayes, Vivian's fiancé, usually a picture of calculated composure, was now visibly rattled. His slicked-back hair and expensive watch seemed to lose their luster under the harsh reality of the bill. He was an executive, a deal-maker, but this was a territory beyond his usual negotiation tactics. Julian, my senior server, ever the professional, moved with a quiet efficiency that suggested he'd been anticipating this moment, his gaze subtly flitting between the folder and me, awaiting my silent command. "Is there a problem?" Arthur asked, noticing Preston's abrupt change in demeanor. No, Preston recovered quickly, forcing a strained laugh. "Just confirming the calculation." I knew exactly what he was looking at. A dinner for 7 with premium wine pairings, special Hoffman requests, and that $800 0 Bordeaux would run well over $3,000 0. Not outrageous for a restaurant of Anya's Table's caliber, but certainly a statement. He reached for his wallet, extracting a black credit card with deliberate slowness, making sure everyone noticed its exclusive tier. Vivian, perhaps sensing Preston's discomfort, chose that precise moment to circle back to her earlier interrogation. "So, Anya," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you never did explain how you're managing to contribute to this extravagant dinner. We wouldn't want you stretching yourself financially on our account." All eyes turned to me again. I could feel the familiar dynamic reasserting itself. Vivian, the successful one, me, the struggling disappointment. "I can cover my portion," I said simply, my voice unwavering. "Can you, though?" she pressed, leaning forward, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Because we all know what food service pays. Can you even afford this place?" The table fell silent. The question hung in the air, so deliberately insulting that even my parents looked uncomfortable. "Vivian," my mother murmured, a rare hint of discomfort in her voice. "No, I want to know," Vivian insisted, eyes locked on mine. "We've spent the entire evening pretending that everything's fine, that Anya's choice to throw away her education hasn't left her struggling. I think we deserve some honesty." I felt a hot flush rising from my chest to my face. 5 years of distance, of building my own life and success, and nothing had changed. I was still the family disappointment, still being asked to justify my existence. Preston, perhaps sensing an opportunity to reassert control after the check shock, joined in. If you need help with your portion, just say so. No shame in that. I don't need help, I said, my voice tight, a tremor of fury beneath the surface. Then how exactly are you paying for this? Vivian demanded. A meal here costs more than you probably make in a week. I opened my mouth to respond, to finally unleash everything, when Preston suddenly frowned at the bill. Wait, there's a mistake here, he announced. They've only charged us for the wines, not the food. He signaled sharply for Julian. Excuse me, there's an error on our check. Julian approached our table with perfect timing, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. In reality, he probably had been. My staff knew me well enough to be watching this drama unfold. Is there a problem, sir? He asked. Yes, you've only charged us for the beverages, not the meal, Preston said, pointing at the bill, a triumphant smirk beginning to form on his face. Julian looked at the check, then at me, his expression questioning. In that moment, I made my decision. The charade had gone on long enough. I gave Julian a slight nod, a nearly imperceptible command. There's no error, sir, Julian said smoothly, his voice unwavering. The dinner portion has been taken care of. By whom? My father asked, frowning, clearly perplexed. Julian turned to me, his professional demeanor giving way to a warm, knowing smile. Welcome back, Miss Anya. Your usual table is ready for your meeting with the investors. Would you like me to handle the situation first? The silence that fell over the table was absolute, heavy with disbelief. 6 pairs of eyes, once filled with judgment, now swam with confusion and dawning shock, all fixed on me. Thank you, Julian, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Yes, please close out Mr. Hayes's beverage tab. The rest is on the house as usual. Very good, Miss Anya, he replied, taking the folder from Preston's now slack grip. Chef Valentina mentioned she'd like your opinion on the new spring menu items. When you have a moment, I'll stop by the kitchen before my meeting, I assured him, a triumphant glint in my eye as he departed. I finally looked directly at my family, allowing myself a moment to savor the profound disorientation on their faces. What is happening? My mother finally managed, her voice a thin whisper. I took a deep breath. The moment I had both dreaded and secretly anticipated for 5 years had arrived. Welcome to Anya's table, I said simply, allowing a slow, victorious smile to bloom. My restaurant. Your restaurant? My father Arthur stammered, his usual composure utterly shattered. You work here? The question hung in the air, a pathetic attempt to cling to their preconceived notions. No, father, I clarified, feeling a strange, profound calm settle over me, a quiet triumph. I own Anya's table. I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor. Comment 1 if you're as stunned as my family right now. Don't go anywhere. The story gets even more unexpected. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, punctuated only by the distant hum of the kitchen and the fading sounds of the closing restaurant. My family, once a tableau of effortless affluence, was now a portrait of utter disarray. Their expressions ranged from confusion to shock, then slowly, a dawning comprehension like a dim light bulb flickering on in a dark room. This was not the polite, controlled world they were used to. This was my world, raw and unapologetic. My mother, Eleanor, her hand fluttering to her pearls, her go-to gesture when socially destabilized, finally managed a choked whisper. What? What is happening? Preston, Vivian's fiancé, was staring at me as though I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues, his earlier smugness replaced by utter bewilderment. Chef Valentina Rios, my brilliant chef de cuisine, chose that moment to approach our table, her crisp whites and embroidered title making an impressive, almost cinematic figure. Her presence was a silent, powerful endorsement of my authority. That's impossible, Vivian blurted, her voice small, stripped of its usual sharp edge. This is one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It's been featured in major magazines. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Yes, I agreed. Food and wine last month, bon appetit before that. The New York Times gave us 4 stars in their review last year. Preston tried to backtrack, but you said you worked in food. You were vague about everything. Because I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was struggling, I explained, my voice cutting through their dawning realization like a surgical knife. And you've all made that abundantly clear tonight. Why wouldn't you tell us about this achievement? My mother interjected, emphasizing achievement, the word itself a glaring testament to their true values. Success, it seemed, retroactively justified my choices in a way passion alone never could. Would you like the full story? I asked, looking around the table, not waiting for an answer. I recounted the grueling 5 years, working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, the blisters and burns, the obsessive study. Site 2029.2015. I spoke of Chef Antoine and then James Warren, my first investor, who believed in my vision. I detailed the millions invested, the immediate acclaim, turning profitable in 6 months, and buying out my partners to become sole owner over a year ago. My father, still seemingly stuck on the finances, muttered about the cost and millions. You've clearly inherited my business sense, he claimed, attempting to snatch credit for my self-made empire. I felt a flash of pure anger at his audacity. I built this myself, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. Without your connections, your money, or your support. Preston, having recovered his composure, suddenly perked up, eager for a new angle. Substantial advance, surely. And this place, significant revenue. Plans for expansion. I have contacts in hospitality investment. I couldn't help but laugh at the transparent pivot from condescension to networking. I'm doing quite well with my current advisors, but thank you, I said, a subtle jab. Vivian, stung, turned back to me. So, all this time, while I thought you were struggling, you were actually succeeding, building all this, and tonight you let us sit here criticizing your food, your wine list, your portion sizes, all while knowing it was yours? I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was still the family failure, I explained. And now I know. That's manipulative, she snapped, but embarrassment flickered in her eyes. More manipulative than asking how I could afford to eat here, than suggesting I must be in debt or dating someone wealthy to afford a meal? I countered. You weren't concerned about me, Vivienne. You were enjoying what you thought was your superiority. Ricardo approached with my special reserve cognac. Your investors' meeting is ready, Chef Valentina says. The kitchen awaits. Thank you, I said, rising. I have a business to run. Anya! Wait, my mother cried. We should celebrate. Brunch this weekend? I looked at her, seeing not the intimidating matriarch, but a woman trying to salvage her pride. I'll think about it, but right now I have investors waiting. As I turned to leave, Leo stood. Anya, he said, his voice raw. This is incredible. What you've built. I'm sorry for not supporting you sooner. His was the most genuine reaction. I nodded, then walked away. 2 weeks later, my family tentatively stepped into my world. Vivian texted for advice. My parents sent articles. Leo even asked to bring his children to the kitchen. These were fragile beginnings, not Hollywood reconciliation, but genuine growth. The most significant change, though, wasn't their perception of me, but my own. I had finally stopped measuring my worth through their eyes. I had found myself. I sat down to write my cookbook introduction. True wealth isn't measured by external validation or material achievement, but by the courage to honor your own voice. The journey hadn't been easy, but in choosing authenticity over approval, I'd found something more valuable than success or family validation. I'd found myself.